U.S., has released new findings based on the General Social Survey. They indicate that every age group in this country is attending worship less frequently. In 1972, close to half of most Americans were in the pews every Sunday. Now it's about 1 in 4, with only 17% of young adults attending weekly. Michael Harrington reporting.
Surveys by the Pew Research Center find the Catholic population in Latin America has shrunk over the past 10 years. Protestantism has remained relatively stable across the region. Experts say the Catholic Church's strong influence has eroded in large measure because of the priest sexual abuse scandal. Meanwhile, the share of Latin America's population that is atheist, agnostic, or followers of no particular religion is on the rise. This is SRN News. The days could be numbered for one state's vanity license plate, which honors a popular toy.
Since 2002, Rhode Island drivers have been able to drive around with Mr. Potato Head license plates. Mr. Potato Head maker Hasbro has had its headquarters in the state, and 2002 was the 50th anniversary of the character. But Hasbro has decided to move its headquarters to Boston. Republican Representative Brian Newberry says Hasbro's relocating will cause untold economic harm to Rhode Island, including a loss of tax revenue. Newberry has introduced legislation to stop the state's Division of Motor Vehicles from providing Mr. Potato Head as a specialty license plate. I'm Donna Warder.
Floods in Mozambique have led to a new threat. Crocodiles appearing in submerged towns and killed at least 3 people. Torrential rains and severe flooding over the past month have killed more than 100 in Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. More on these stories at srnews.com.
1 Corinthians 10:13, There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. God's Word, the Bible, concerning temptation. 1 Corinthians 10:13.
Do you toss in bed rehearsing the cares of the day? Listen to Music Till Dawn, featuring sacred music and devotional thoughts all night long. That's right here on VCY America.
VCY America is KVCX Gregory and WVIW Bridgeport. Christian Information Radio.
History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
On this day, January 23rd, 1789, Georgetown University was founded by John Carroll, the first Catholic bishop in the United States. He was the cousin of the wealthiest citizen in America, Charles Carroll, the last surviving signer of the Declaration. In 1776, the Continental Congress asked John Carroll to be part of a commission, which included Benjamin Franklin, to enlist the aid of Canada in the cause of the American Revolution. Bishop John Carroll wrote, "Freedom and independence acquired by and cemented with the mingled blood of Protestant and Catholic fellow citizens should be equally enjoyed by all."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And friends, thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today here on VCY America. It's a Friday News Roundup and Comment, and certainly there has been much that has been going on, and we will continue to keep you informed here across this network here through VCY America. But many discussions going on right now with the storms making their way. Many are feeling the bite of winter time. And looking at a story here from Newsmax.com, the Texas and Oklahoma bracing for heavy snow and ice that could make roadways treacherous today. Expected to be some of the initial effects of a huge days-long winter storm threatening catastrophic damage, extensive power outages, bitterly cold weather to more than 170 million people across the nation. The National Weather Service says about half the population. Combination of heavy snow, freezing rain, sleet in store from the southern Rockies to the New England through Monday. And even when that's over, a round of extremely cold air hitting areas of the southern plains to the northeast next week, the Weather Service says. In the Houston area, utility company has some 3,300 employees ready to work the winter storm. All hands on deck is what the mayor is saying there. Expected to bring a crippling ice storm from Texas through parts of the south. Potentially more than a foot of snow from Oklahoma through D.C., New York, and Boston, then a final punch of bitter cold air that could drop wind chills to minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit in parts of Minnesota and North Dakota, Wisconsin in that mix as well. Forecasters warning that damage, especially in the areas impounded by ice, could rival a hurricane. And especially dangerous prospect in places where ice and snow weighs down the tree branches and power lines, cuts electricity, perhaps for days. Roads and sidewalks could remain icy well into next week. Ice can add hundreds of pounds to power lines and branches, make them susceptible to snapping, especially in windy weather. Freezing temperatures expected all the way to Florida, forecasters are saying. I say all that to know that, just to let you know that, indeed, a good portion of the country is being impacted by this at this very time. And be praying for your local Christian radio station as ice can do great damage to towers and antennas and guy lines. And we are so grateful for the Christian radio stations that bring you Crosstalk, and keep your station in your prayers. Well, it's official. America is officially out of the World Health Organization. The U.S. has withdrawn from the World Health Organization, freeing itself from its constraints, as President Trump promised on his first day in office. That being said by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy. They declared this in a joint statement that came out just yesterday, saying this action responds to the WHO's failure during the COVID-19 pandemic and seeks to rectify the harm from those failures inflicted on the American people. Well, friends, as we covered Minneapolis and St. Paul yesterday, the arrests have begun. This release came out early this morning from the Department of Homeland Security. They indicate that the Department of Homeland Security joined the Department of Justice in arresting 3 individuals in connection with a planned riot at a church in St. Paul, Minnesota, Sunday. On Thursday, Homeland Security investigators alongside FBI partners arrested Nakima Levy Armstrong and Chantil Louisa Allen. That's some reports saying that she is also a sitting member of the St. Paul Public Schools Board, and also William Kelly in connection with Sunday's riot. I'm reading directly from their press release. Religious freedom. This is a statement from Secretary Kristi Noem. Religious freedom is the bedrock of the United States. There is no First Amendment right to obstruct someone from practicing their religion. ICE and other federal immigrant law enforcement have arrested more than 10,000 illegal aliens in Minnesota since January 20th, 2025. In response to that robust enforcement of law and order, leftist agitators have attacked organized riots and attempted to thwart law enforcement daily, even as they face a 1,300% increase in assaults against them, a 3,200% increase in vehicle attacks against them, and an 8,000% increase in death threats against them. The brave men and women of ICE will not be deterred. Again, that coming from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Interesting story from my charisma.com, and that is Pastor Jack Hibbs, in a video reaction addressing the incident, said the invasion of the sanctuary by activists was deliberate, unlawful, and revealing. According to Hibbs, the interruption was not accidental or emotional, but premeditated. He noted that cameras were rolling before the activists entered the sanctuary, that participants later described the action as a clandestine operation. Hibbs pushed back strongly on claims that the disruption was protected by the First Amendment, a justification raised during the confrontation by disgraced journalist Don Lemon, who attended the event. Hibbs said, quote, "You cannot hinder or restrict or do anything to sequester the expression of religious freedom in the United States. It's a felony." Also been reported that he said this is a testing of the water to see what Christians will do. If there's no pushback, it will continue. He went on to say that pastors need to stand up, churches need to be prepared for the evil day. Pastor Jack Hibbs commenting on the Minnesota church disruption last Sunday. Also coming to us from the Western Journal, the Minnesota federal magistrate judge has refused to sign a criminal complaint connected to former CNN host Don Lemon for his role in the incident that took place at City's Church. The Assistant Attorney General Harmy Dillon later said that Lemon claiming to be a journalist was not a badge or a shield that protects you from criminal consequences. From townhall.com, there's a disturbing report coming out of Minnesota that dogs belonging to an immigration officer are being targeted. Department of Homeland Security and anti-ICE agitators in Minneapolis are targeting the patrol's canines. At the kennel where the canine Dinah was staying, it was discovered that an employee had written ICE out on her feed chart. DHS wrote in a social media post they're even going after the dogs. From FoxNews.com, in a chilling series of social media posts on Saturday night, Minnesota State Senator and former Minneapolis mayoral candidate Omar Fatah pledged to make the Cedar Riverside neighborhood of the city a no-go zone for white supremacists. That refers to Muslim-majority neighborhoods where it's not safe for white people to go. Omar Fatah is not talking about the Ku Klux Klan or the Proud Boys here. He's almost certainly talking about anyone who supports President Donald Trump and the operation of ICE in the Twin Cities, reports Fox. From townhall.com, a Biden-appointed judge, U.S. District Judge Kate Menendez, has issued a whack ruling last week, essentially hamstringing how federal law enforcement deals with peaceful protesters in Minnesota. They couldn't detain them or deploy tear gas. Well, the Trump administration was going to appeal, and the federal court has now paused that Menendez decision. From Not the Bee, turns out it's really easy to make money in America by lying. Destiny and Sean Jackson, they report, Minneapolis parents who claimed, I'm going to emphasize that word, they claimed that their truck was lifted off the ground by a tear gas canister as they were peacefully driving home with 6 kids from a basketball game at Anderson Middle School. On a GoFundMe page, Destiny says the tear gas flooded the cabin of their truck and her infant stopped breathing. Well, there's only one problem, folks. As they pointed out in the article, Destiny and Sean Jackson were filmed participating in the mob that was harassing federal officers. The two apparently left their kids in the car while they got out and got mostly peaceful. If the children were exposed to tear gas, it's because their parents endangered them by leaving them in a vehicle harassing federal officers and trying to flee the scene of the crime. Sean specifically told local news that he was not participating in the protest despite being filmed in the protest. Well, again, CBS News, ABC News, others reported on this story. Will they report the truth? Remains to be seen. That's my thought on it. WND.com. Federal officials on Monday announced the seizure of more than $14,000 in undeclared cash from a pair of Somali-born American citizens heading out of Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport on International Fight Sunday. ICE and CBP remained vigilant in detecting and preventing the illegal movement of funds across borders to protect national security. From the Free Beacon, a racial equity and restorative justice nonprofit funded by Minnesota taxpayers is calling for donations to a new bail fund that's helping free anti-ICE agitators and illegal immigrants detained in Minneapolis. The Legal Rights Center, which Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison led for 5 years, is promoting the People's Bail Fund of Minnesota through Know Your Rights Minnesota, Legal Rights Center project that provides legal information and resources for activists. Here we go again. From WND.com, a federal law enforcement officer was injured Wednesday in California when a criminal illegal alien from El Salvador allegedly rammed officials with his car, prompting shots to be fired. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security says DHS law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted operation in Compton, California, to arrest a violent criminal illegal alien from El Salvador, William Eduardo Moran Carballo, who is involved in a human smuggling operation, has had 2 prior arrests for inflicting corporal injury on a spouse or cohabitant, and an immigration judge issued him a final order of removal in 2019. In a dangerous attempt to evade arrest, this criminal illegal alien weaponized his vehicle, rammed law enforcement. Fearing for his life and safety, an agent fired defensive shots. The criminal illegal alien was not hit and attempted to flee on foot. He was successfully apprehended by law enforcement. The illegal alien was not injured, but a CBP officer was injured. A statement here indicates that these dangerous attempts to evade arrest have surged since sanctuary politicians, including Governor Newsom, have encouraged illegal aliens to evade arrest and provide guides advising illegal aliens how to recognize ICE, block entry, and defy arrest. Our officers are now facing a 3,200% increase in vehicle attacks. From the Washington Times, U.S. Customs or Immigration and Customs Enforcement announced Wednesday that it was surging people into Maine to conduct arrest of illegal immigrants there, moving to push back on the sanctuary politicians who run the state. The effort is officially dubbed Operation Catch of the Day. It began Tuesday, has already netted arrest of migrants with convictions for aggravated assault, child endangerment, and cocaine possession. Maine Governor Janet Mills, a Democrat who has delivered tough talk on the possibility of an ICE surge, said on MS Now that its agents are not welcome here, and if they were going to deprive people of civil rights. Andrew Benson, Maine's acting U.S. attorney, also presaged the surge when he released a statement Monday warning the state's residents not to take their protesting of ICE over the line. And from SlayNews.com, a leading China analyst is warning that the recent surge of anti-ICE protests across the U.S. may not be as organic as they appear, alleging that networks tied to the Chinese Communist Party could be covertly financing and directing the unrest. Asia analyst and author Gordon Chang said the Chinese Communist Party has well-documented history of using proxies and intermediaries to destabilize adversaries while maintaining plausible deniability. He argued similar tactics may now be playing out on American soil. We've got so much more in our news roundup today, and we trust you'll stay with us. We'll be back in 1 minute. This is Crosstalk coming your way from the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and author at the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, why is the ocean salty?
Chris, salt is added to the ocean on a daily basis as rain falls on the land surface, dissolving salt, which then gets into the rivers and ultimately to the ocean. And we can measure how much salt is carried in the rivers. We also know how much salt is in the ocean. A simple division of the amount of salt by the rate at which it's added shows us that the age of the Earth's oceans is far too young to have allowed for evolution, because evolution assumes that life evolved in a salty sea long ago. But if the oceans were old, they would already be so choked with salt that life would be impossible. You see, Chris, the direct scientific observations do not support the evolution idea. They do support recent creation, and that's the recent creation we read about when we go back to Genesis.
For free information on creation, visit us on the web at www.icr.org.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Well, we're familiar with the scripture that talks about, as it was in the days of Noah, will show the coming of the Son of Man be. And we think about the days of Noah. Genesis chapter 6, God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth. Does that sound like today, friends? And that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And friends, we are seeing that play out before our very eyes. We see also from the scripture, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. Doesn't take too many scans online or hearing newscasts to understand that we are right at that point here even today. As we continue our news roundup and comment today on Crosstalk, we're going to focus on New York for just a bit. Democratic New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani according to the Daily Caller here, confirmed on Tuesday he supports abolishing ICE. He was on The View and accused ICE of terrorizing people and violating the law while disregarding people's humanity. He has called on New Yorkers, right after he was elected, called on New Yorkers to obstruct ICE agents. Said they're terrorizing people. Now, friends, when we see the crimes, when the crimes are listed that these who are here illegally have perpetrated and have conducted, and why ICE is going after them, they are terrorizing people here in the United States, violating our laws. And he accuses ICE of disregarding people's humanity. What about the victims of those who are being harmed by those here illegally? JustTheNews.com is reporting New York City lost nearly 5,000 businesses early last year as employers closed their doors or left for other low-tax states, according to a new report. The analysis comes as newly elected Mayor Zoran Mamdani pushes, I guess it's a punishment too, pushes to hike business taxes for his agenda. The report released Thursday by the Economic Development Corporation showed more than 3,500 new businesses opened their doors in New York City during the second quarter of the fiscal year, but that was offset by a loss of about 8,400 employers. That's the weakest quarter for business formation since the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the report author said. The corporation's report is the latest to highlight New York City's shrinking business sector, with employers looking to other low-tax states. It also comes as Mamdani seeks to draw up support for higher taxes to pay for his plans for universal child care, tuition-free college, and free bus service in the city. Well, friends, as we think about the goings-on in the Twin Cities, a lot of this stems from independent journalist Nick Shirley, who blew the whistle on the Somali fraud matter. He blew it wide open. And looking at a story here from townhall.com, his reporting was so effective that it drove Tim Walz to drop out of the gubernatorial race and receive death threats. We have Nick Shirley receiving death threats. I played that just a week ago. Shirley remains unintimidated, though. He has dropped another video on welfare fraud, including a TSA whistleblower who alleges millions in taxpayer dollars have been ferried through American airports. Well, now he has testified before the House Judiciary Committee hearing that they were holding on fraud. Here's what he had to say.
I'm here today to speak on behalf of all hardworking, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens here inside of the United States. I've helped bring to light widespread fraud that's happening inside our nation, and we the people have had enough of our hard-earned money going towards fraudsters as if it's no big deal. As I speak here, I want to ask everyone a question. How much do we trust when we pay our taxes it's going to benefit our nation? People erupted during the Boston Tea Party over just a few percentages as they believed they were being taxed without representation. Nowadays, we have the representation, but do we trust our representatives? My name is Nick Shirley, and I made a 41-minute video that I posted on platforms like X and YouTube. My video received over 100 million views, and it created instant change within our government. As the federal government launched investigations in departments such as Health and Human Services froze over $185 million in child care funding until businesses can prove they are legitimate businesses. I actually became aware of the fraud that was happening in Minnesota in June of 2025 as I was there for a separate video, and Minnesotans started reaching out to me, asking me if I was making a video on the fraud. I said, well, what fraud? And this lady, she was a real estate agent, and she says, well, I'm having a hard time selling my properties because people are curious about these assisted livings that are popping up next door to some of the houses that we're buying, or the home health care clinics that are popping up, and we don't know who's next to these houses that we're trying to sell. And I said, well, I'm not going to come and make a video if I don't have any proof. So therefore, I left Minnesota, and I continued to look for fraud in the best way I could. And as I was getting my own information, a man by the name of David reached out to me, and he said, hey, I have been investigating this fraud for years now. I have been driving by these child care centers. I've never seen a single child, and I have received information from the state of Minnesota as to how much money these places are receiving. I said, great, let me come to Minnesota, and we'll make this video about potential fraud that was taking place inside of Minnesota. we go to a daycare, and I'm instantly surprised by what we see. We arrived, and it was an industrialized building, and there was 2 daycares registered at that building. And the first thing I noticed is all the windows are blacked out, and there's no footprints in the snow of any children. There's no playgrounds or anything that would make it look like it's a child care. But above me, a sign read, open 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. But there was nobody there. The doorbell did not even work. And then we continued to go to other daycares, and we noticed the same pattern. No children, blacked out windows, and one daycare, a learning center, spelled Quality Learning Center instead of Quality Learning Center. They had received $1.9 million, yet with that $1.9 million, they could not even spell Leering right on their sign. Governor Walz has said he's been fighting fraud in Minnesota since 2019 and said the buck stops with him. However, how long would it take for you to notice $1 million leaving your bank account and not knowing where it's going? That's essentially what had been happening in Minnesota for years, as billions of dollars has been misplaced. And meanwhile, while people like Governor Tim Walz call people like me a white supremacist, delusional conspiracy theorist, he actually decided to drop out of re-election because I believe of how deep and extensive this fraud is. Thank you very much. Since my reporting, the HHS department froze over $185 million, and to this day, not a single business has been able to prove proof of legitimacy. How fast would you be proving that you are a legitimate business if you have children to actually feed and to take care of? You'd be sending in that paperwork instantly. I made this video to document the widespread fraud that has been taking place, as I truly believe all fraud is bad. And people like me, my generation, we're sick of seeing tax dollars go towards fraud. We just want to have the same opportunities that our fathers and our grandparents had. And when you see people making millions of dollars by committing fraud, it upsets everybody from all age demographics. And so I hope today we can have a good conversation, and I think we can all agree that fraud is bad and that fraud is fraud. And I wish the best for our country, and I think that's what needs to be happening, is to crack down on all forms of fraud. So thank you for having me, and God bless the USA.
That was Nick Shirley testifying this week before the House Judiciary Committee. And again, he said staggering numbers, over 100 million views of that video that he put out there regarding the fraud taking place there in the Minneapolis area. I have a question. What is going on in Virginia? The state of Virginia, and, you know, Jelaine Appling, who was the former president of Wisconsin Family Council, used to say this mantra over and over: elections have consequences. And my, oh my, do elections have consequences when we look at Virginia. They have just changed their governor, and now also not only a Democratic governor, but also the Assembly and the House and the Senate there. But here is Virginia Dems are very emboldened now, and they're pushing to make the entire kids' curriculum in schools transgender and queer, reports WND.com. They proposed a bill to permanently embed and test inclusive history, including racial and LGBTQ plus topics in children's classrooms across the state. It would require all public elementary, secondary schools as well to adjust history, and also their social science classes to include the contributions and perspectives and experiences of historically marginalized communities, including those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. They said it's necessary in order to affirm such communities and promote a more holistic understanding of history to ensure comprehensive, accurate, and inclusive education. This would be State education standards would be updated as soon as March 1 of 2027. The inclusive history resources created by the Education Department should be fully integrated across curricula and must not be isolated to a single month or observance. No, not just a Gay History Month or something like that. No, it must be all throughout the curriculum. Teachers will be equipped with culturally responsive strategies for teaching inclusive history. And it's not only that. From the Free Beacon, Governor Abigail Spanberger has appointed 2 Qatari lobbyists to serve on George Mason University's Board of Visitors, a Washington Free Beacon report has found. And it doesn't stop there. The Daily Caller reports the Virginia State House's Court of Justice Committee weighing soft on crime legislation after Democrats won a trifecta in the state government. House Bill 244 would expand parole eligibility for certain convicted robbers and reduce the severity of specific robbery offenses. Is it George Soros running the state? The lawmakers' bill would remove some robbery crimes from those considered acts of violence in Virginia. And doesn't stop there, Virginians. Democrats now controlling the legislature and governor's office. Here's just a few bills that have been proposed. Now, friends, they're just brand new into the term. A new 4.3% sales tax on Uber Eats, Amazon, and deliveries. New sales tax on admissions to a wide variety of businesses. Create 2 new higher tax brackets of 8% and 10% on people making over $600,000 and a new 10% tax bracket for anyone making over $1 million. A 3.8% investment tax on top of state income taxes. Raise a hotel tax. New property tax, personal property tax on landscaping equipment. To ban gas-powered leaf blowers. Guarantee illegal aliens for education. Make it illegal to approach somebody at an abortion clinic. Extend the time that absentee ballots can be received after the election day to 3 days. Allow people to cast their votes electronically through the Internet. Expand ranked choice voting. Extend the deadline for ballot curing to 1 week after Election Day. Add Virginia to the National Popular Vote Compact for presidential elections, or electors, that is. Make it illegal to hand count ballots. Think about that. To make it illegal to hand count ballots. Let's see. Then they have like an 11% sales tax on all firearms and ammunition, prohibit outdoor shooting of a firearm on land less than 5 acres, replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day, and the list goes on and on and on. We're going to take a quick break here on this Friday News Roundup. And friends, after the break, we're going to come back. We'll hear some audio clips. The first is how President Trump started his speech at the World Economic Forum taking place in... as he addresses in Davos, and that's Switzerland, and we'll be back with more information on that and many other issues right after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Is it okay to abort a baby? People give many reasons why abortion is an acceptable choice. The inconvenience of pregnancy, infant disabilities. It's the woman's body. It's not a baby. This is a result of rape or incest. Incompetence of parents. And she's not ready to be a parent. In the DVD, 7 Reasons, Ray Comfort addresses these 7 questions, reasoning with college students and people on the street about whether such objections are justified. You will see those who are ardently pro-choice change their mind in moments. This powerful 42-minute DVD is available for a donation of $9 or 5 copies for a donation of $22 when you call VCY 1-800-729-9829. Ask for the DVD 7 Reasons.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. We're so glad that you've joined us. I've got a lot to get into this last segment here today on the program, and trust you'll stay with us. By the way, I saw this. I wanted to get this in last week, but didn't. Ran out of time. And that is a new app, or it's an app that's out. I'm not sure how new it is, but it's an app called Are You Dead? That checks up on people living alone, has become the most popular paid Apple Store download in China. You see, there are so many single-person households in China. It rose to 19.5% in 2024. That's about 1 out of every 5 in a single-person household. The app, called Xiaomi in Chinese, requires users to check in by pressing a button. If they fail to do so over 2 consecutive days, The app sends a message to an emergency contact nominated by the user. Most popular app in China, Are You Dead? Well, friends, this week, the World Economic Forum, it's just wrapping up today. Lord willing, on Tuesday, we'll be joined by Alex Newman with a recap of the entire week, but just wanted you to hear how President Trump began his session at the World Economic Forum this week.
Well, thank you very much, Larry. It's great to be back in beautiful Davos, Switzerland, and to address so many respected business leaders, so many friends, few enemies, and all of the distinguished guests. It's a who's who, I will say that. I've come to this year's World Economic Forum with truly phenomenal news from America. Yesterday marked the one-year anniversary of my inauguration, and today, after 12 months back in the White House, our economy is booming, growth is exploding, productivity is surging, investment is soaring, incomes are rising, inflation has been defeated, our previously open and dangerous border is closed and virtually impenetrable, and the United States is in the midst of the fastest and most dramatic economic turnaround in our country's history. Under the Biden administration, America was plagued by the nightmare of stagflation, meaning low growth, and high inflation, a recipe for misery, failure, and decline. But now, after just 1 year of my policies, we are witnessing the exact opposite. Virtually no inflation and extraordinarily high economic growth. Growth like I believe you'll see very shortly our country has never seen before, perhaps no country has ever seen before.
We'll get more into this on Tuesday and get into the Greenland aspect of it as well and other issues. But World Economic Forum wrapping up this week in Davos, Switzerland. Also, from allisraelnews.com, President Trump announced the members of the Board of Peace that is intended to oversee efforts to rebuild the Gaza. He also announced an interim body, the Gaza Executive Board, that will operate between the Board of Peace and the Palestinian Technocrat Committee. This new Gaza Executive Board includes representatives from Turkey and Qatar. This announcement drew swift response from Israeli leaders and politicians from across the political spectrum, most of whom were highly critical of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Following President Trump's announcement, the Prime Minister's office released an unusual statement which said the announcement regarding the composition of the Gaza Executive Board, which is subordinate to the Board of Peace, was not coordinated with Israel and runs contrary to its policy. Times of Israel also reports that the Prime Minister pledged Monday that Turkish and Qatari forces would not set foot in Gaza. In a speech Monday in the Knesset, the Premier also claimed that Turkey and Qatar, both countries that are hostile to Israel, will not have any authority or influence in the various bodies set up by President Trump's administration to run post-war Gaza. And also from Newsmax.com, President Trump yesterday withdrew an invitation for Canada to join this Board of Peace aimed at resolving global conflict. Trump's post came after the Canadian finance minister said Thursday that Ottawa does not plan to pay the $1 billion price tag for a permanent seat on the Board of Peace, which initially will oversee the governance and reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. WND.com, a new report on social media reveals that Iran claims to have tested an ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, that has arranged to reach eastern United States, they claim. This claim comes from an Iranian professor and expert on Russia. A report from the Middle East Media Research Institute explained, according to the Post, the missile test was carried out with Russia's approval. The Post included a video of the missile test. There have been threats against President Trump's life by Iran. And in an interview that was broadcast Tuesday night, I'm looking at an article right now from the Daily Caller, President Trump told News Nation host Katie Pavlich that he left instructions to wipe Iran off the face of the earth if he is assassinated. Let's listen in.
Iran, you mentioned in the press conference today that you did in the briefing room with reporters that they canceled or at least put on hold hundreds of hangings that were scheduled. However, there are reports that they are still burning thousands of protesters alive. They also issued an assassination threat against you over the weekend. I know that you can't talk about what's on the table, but what is your response to Iran's leadership and the regime continuing to taunt you, threaten you, especially given over the weekend you said it's time for new leadership in Iran?
Well, they shouldn't be doing it, but I've left notification. Anything ever happens, we're going to blow the whole country is going to get blown up. So we've, originally Biden should have said something, when they made a statement. We always said, why doesn't Biden say anything? Because he didn't. But a president has to defend a president. Like if I were here and they were making that threat to somebody, not even a president, but somebody like they did with me, I would absolutely hit them so hard. But I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei posted multiple threats against President Trump on social media, including depicting the president in a coffin. Usama Daktak has been with us, as has others, warning us about the influx of Islam, what Islam's goals really are. Again, it's not integration. It is that of taking over, taking charge. And a fascinating story coming out, this coming from Jihad Watch. Islamic scholar and Kuwaiti Muslim Brotherhood leader Dr. Tariq al-Suwaidan was interviewed this past August on an episode of the Thinking Muslim podcast hosted by Mohammed Jalal. And in this podcast, Dr. al-Suwaidan said that it is only necessary to train 2% of the Muslim youth in the West in order to overcome everyone else and precipitate a major social change that will lead the Islamic nation toward a future civilization. That's astounding. Shahram Hadian has talked about the upper house. Usama has talked about when they get the upper hand. He is saying if they can get 2% of the Muslim youth in the West in order to overcome everyone else. Listen to the things he had to say.
Let me finish with two statements that are statistical. If we can train 2% of the youth, only 2%, we will overcome the rest.
Really?
And in any civilization, in any country in the whole world, and this is not by me, this is research and statistics from the West. If 3.5% of any society rise against oppression, change will happen without doubt. Wow. So many people think that we have to change the whole society, and it's not true. See, most people are cowards. So whoever rules them, they will accept. So all you need is 2%, that's all. I believe that we have reached close to 1.5%. So we are not far away from real change, inshallah, that would lead the Ummah towards a future civilization.
Now, friends, this is him in his own words. This is him in his own words. And it's very interesting because when Usama will quote or talk about them, he is the one told to be hateful, conspiracy theorist, the one wearing the tinfoil hat. And in another story here as well from Jihad Watch, Imam Mohammed Badawi, director of the Muslim American Society Youth Center in Brooklyn, New York, said in a January 16th, 2026 Friday sermon that as a Muslim, it is his life's mission to fight the U.S. government, the U.S. Army, ICE, or whatever they control, declaring, do your worst.
As a Muslim, my response to all of this is, do your worst. I am not afraid. Because even if this body is broken, the spirit inside of it, you cannot reach. And it will continue, and Allah will replace you. Whether I see that or not is irrelevant. But I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of the U.S. government. I am not afraid of the United States Army. I am not afraid of ICE. I'm not afraid of whatever they control. Not only am I not afraid, but it is my life mission to stand against all of the above. that every single iota of strength, wealth, and spirit that I have until I die will be spent fighting everything I just mentioned. To the last breath, or until they cease their oppression, cease their injustice. That's my reason for existence.
That's coming from New York, Brooklyn, New York. LifeSiteNews.com, an estimated 1,300 people attended a city council meeting in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma earlier this week and successfully pressured elected representatives to vote 4-1 against a rezoning proposal that would have allowed a new 15-acre Islamic mosque to be built. Sarah Gray, chairwoman for the Tulsa County Democratic Party, claimed that their opposition was rooted in bigotry. These are not terrorists. These are our community members, she said. No public meeting should be allowed to be filled with such hatred directed at a specific community based on their religion. Friends, we just heard from within their so-called religion. It's a political system. It is about conquest. We understand that in this rural Oklahoma area, their reporting has just over 110,000 citizens, and reporting the growing number within the Islamic community. Approximately 10,000 Muslims reportedly living in Broken Arrow. Also, Jihad Watch, this is interesting, they put 125 refugees and 125 students in the Netherlands in the same building. A total of 125 students and 125 refugees would live alongside each other and were even encouraged to buddy up so the migrants would adapt to life in the Netherlands more quickly. But things turned sour as students shared horrific details of sexual assaults, harassment, violence, and stalking. Former residents have filed 20 reports of sexual assault and violence in the past 18 months. Drug trafficking reported, fights breaking out. Housing associations suspected a gang rape had taken place in one of the studios. Good news here from LifeNews.com. President Trump has ended federal funding for research involving the use of aborted baby parts, a major victory for pro-life advocates that halts taxpayer support for such studies effective immediately. The National Institutes of Health announced the policy change, which applies to all NIH grants, cooperative agreements, transaction awards, research and developmental contracts, and the NIH Intramural Research Program. It prohibits the use of funds for research involving aborted baby parts obtained from elective abortions, while allowing ethical fetal tissue from sources such as miscarriages when donors consent. And by the way, Vice President and Mrs. Vance expecting their fourth child. That was announced also this week here in America. This would be the first vice president to have a child while serving in office. Let's take a quick break, friends. Our number to crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Much of the nation is watching in horror the video coming out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, where this Minneapolis church was raided by leftists. They claim they were there protesting ICE, and yet they seem to be being led by Don Lemon, the former CNN employee who I guess now has his own podcast. He confronted the pastor at the front of the church and said that this was legal, constitutional, First Amendment right to protest. Not on private property, it's not. Don Lemon went on to say that, yes, he realizes this could be traumatic for people. Indeed it is. It's also dangerous. Apparently, there is the thought that one of the pastors of that church is connected to ICE. Regardless, this is a private church service. It's private property. But my friends, this is the kind of Civil War tactics that I think we're going to increasingly see funded by enemies, foreign and domestic, as the church is now under assault in America.
If you want to comment on the stories I've shared or other current event stories, there has been so much unfolding this week. Our number, 800-733-9829. I mentioned about the Vice President Vance, his wife, expecting their fourth child, and also Carolyn Levitt has announced her own expecting of a child, and Fox News is reporting that a Florida hospital now has terminated a nurse who said that she had hoped White House Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt gets seriously injured during childbirth. And she posted this. She said, as a labor and delivery nurse, so in my position as a labor and delivery nurse is what she's referring to. That's her position. And I quote again, as a labor and delivery nurse, it gives me great joy to wish Carolyn Levitt a 4th-degree tear. This is Leslie Lawler, former labor and delivery nurse at Baptist Health Boca Raton Regional Hospital, said in a video posted on TikTok. She went on with some additional expletives that I'm not going to quote from. But in a statement to Fox News Digital Thursday, Patty Abril, Director of Media Relations and Strategic Communications at Baptist Health, said Lawler is no longer employed at the hospital, saying the comments made in this post by a nurse at one of our facilities do not reflect our values or the standards we expect of healthcare professionals. Following a prompt review, the individual is no longer employed by our health system. We've got Mark calling from Monroe. Mark, you're on the air.
Hey, Jim. I totally agree with Jack Hibbs' assessment of the city church assault in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that this incident and countless others are premeditated, scripted, rehearsed, and staged in order to dominate a perception for deception to advance a deep state's cause. So they use a personality like Don Lemon, who I consider, at best a fake journalist, in order to enhance their, their dirty work, so they can, force it on the public that that's their narrative. So that's my comment.
Great, thank you, Mark. And Jack Hibbs very forthright in what he was saying in regard to this. And if it's not nipped in the bud now, it's going to be cropping up in churches all across this nation. Greg is calling from Bloomington, Illinois. Greg, you're on the air.
Hi, Jim. I'm very much a fan of President Trump. I think he's the greatest president we've ever had, at least in my lifetime. He seems to be very in alignment with Judeo-Christian, doctrine and the like. But I have to admit, the Board of Peace, in relation to biblical prophecy, that's an interesting title to call that.
Yeah.
And the fact that he appointed himself as the lead of that, that's very interesting. I'm not saying that Donald Trump is the Antichrist or anything like that, but it seems to be in alignment with what's coming. What was it that Jimmy DeYoung would say? The everything was aligning toward.
He said he would say the stage is being set for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled.
Exactly, and that's just interesting that it's panning out that way.
Yeah,
so.
indeed.
And I'd like your
Yeah,
opinion.
well, I agree. It's very interesting to see. Thank you for the call. Very interesting to see the formation of this board and who's being invited to be part of it, and to know that you've got those, even with Islamic nations, invited to be part of this. And now they have extended, an offer for the Pope himself to be on this Board of Peace. Really looks like we're coming together for a one world type of situation. And I find that very interesting here. And Greg, thanks for pointing that matter out. We got Jesus calling from Glendale, Arizona. You're on the air, Jesus.
Thank you, sir, for taking my phone call. I just want to share, too, I don't know if you heard, but next week we should pray against this. But the Senate or Congress wants to pass a bill in using $5.7 billion from American citizen taxpayer money to pay for refugee programs.
Okay, and is that an appropriations bill?
Yes, and I believe that's why we're seeing all this fraud, because like President Trump and J.D. Vance says, Marco Rubio says, we need to stop giving money to people in countries that hate us and want to destroy us.
Thank you, Jesus. Tammy in New Berlin, Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Twice in the book of Judges and in Deuteronomy 12:8, it says every man did what was right in his own eyes. And as I listened to the news you shared today, I just felt that those scriptures described, basically a mentality going on in our country. But then one other thought is from Psalm 107:20, He, meaning our God, sent His word and healed them and delivered them from all their destructions. And that's
Amen.
my comment.
Thank you, Tammy. Tom in Virginia, Minnesota, you're on the air.
Hey, Jim. Hope
Your day is going well. Say most people probably aren't aware, but today there's a day called the Day of Truth and Freedom in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they're having a walkout. A lot of businesses are closing today because of the ICE thing, and it's I find the irony and hypocrisy of it all so incredibly laughable. They have a clip from their website that says, "A free and democratic people depend upon our leaders being rooted in the truth. Repression depends on lies. Freedom depends on a shared truth." And here sitting in St. Paul is our crooked governor, attorney general, and the rest of the criminals who have aided and abetted a multi-billion-dollar scam so that they can remain in power and enrich themselves at the same time. But isn't it interesting that these Marxists and anarchists aren't protesting this untruthfulness, graft, and corruption that's embedded in our state government, but they're just so deceived, and I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Thanks for the call from Virginia, Minnesota. And Alice in Arkansas, we're down to 30 seconds, Alice.
Well, my scripture is, if God be for us, who can be against us? The Iranian missile, all the Islamic people wanting to take over America. We need a revival. May we all examine our hearts before God, the God of love and joy and peace.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Alice. And well said, well-fitting conclusion to our broadcast today. There is much in this world, but as Jesus said, in this world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Our trust, our hope, our confidence relies in him. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk for the Friday News Roundup and comment. And all this week here on Crosstalk, wonderful guests coming up next week on the broadcast as well. And indeed, it is Friday. The Lord's Day is coming. I trust you'll be in a Bible-believing, Bible-teaching local church. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.